All right, welcome back to What in the Hermeneutic. I am Paul Koch. Cindy Koch here with me. She's our student of Biblical Hermeneutics, and she will be leading this discussion as we've been doing. We moved from the text itself, kind of some concerns or questions about the text, maybe not concerns, to now we're going to talk about meaning, just in this base form. It's kind of some questions. What are we looking at? What is that? Where do we find meaning in the words? Is it in the history of the word? Is it in the context? And we're just going to kind of sketch out some of the parameters of that, because there's a lot more to come about things like referent and those sorts of things. Join us for our conversation. Take a minute to like and subscribe, and share us with friends, colleagues like that. And let's keep having these conversations, and let's get after it.
Spit out my Lord in every way, yet I'm still welcome in the arms.
Okay, so we have talked about who needs a hermeneutic. We talked about the text itself a bit last time. And so now we're moving into this conversation about meaning, right? So we're talking about the marks on the page, the actual things themselves that you are reading.
Right. As we discussed a little bit last time, the English Bible is a translation of what we would say are the original languages. Old Testament was Hebrew, New Testament Greek. And so anybody who has tried to speak different languages knows that it's not always a one-to-one correlation what this word means when we're looking at different languages. Even within the Bible, we have words used differently. And so this is just a consideration, again, when we're thinking about how we translate, how we get meaning out of the words that we see printed on the page, just to stand back and realize like what we're actually doing here. Mm-hmm. So I know it's pretty popular, and I've done it before because it's kind of fun as well. When we're reading through scripture and we come to this word that we either don't know or we absolutely love, whatever it is, and we do a word study and try to find that word and how it's used like all over scripture, which it's kind of fun because you can kind of see all the different places. Let's say, for example, love. You know, we come across the word love. God so loved the world. What does it mean that God loved? And so we start going through all the places in scripture and we start, marking it down, like, what does it mean in the Old Testament? What does it mean in the New Testament? Let's just find every verse that says love. Well, I mean, that's all good for fun, but that doesn't necessarily give a meaning for what love means in that particular verse. I think there's a few more things that we need to consider, at least, before we understand what kind of a grasp we have on the meaning of a word.
Yeah. So, like, what'll often happen, I know, like, when I meet with the guys and we're working through text, is especially a word we don't know. We come to a word and you're like, what is that? And for those, who know inflected languages, like Greek and that, hey, well, let's break it down to its roots. What's its root? Oh, it's coming from this word. That somehow informs us in what it's doing here. But sometimes it's vastly different by the time you get to its use in the text that you're dealing with. So it's not a matter of simply saying, let me unpack this word, do an etymology study, and now I know this word as it's used in this instance.
Right. And
all you know is the history, which is something.
So you said an etymology study. I think that's just something to bring out a little bit more. Just because a word was used in a particular way at the beginning in history sometime doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to be used with that particular meaning in all times.
Sure.
So, and I think we have to understand that happens on both ends of the spectrum. So when when the Hebrews were, actually they did a lot of speaking
Oral, sure,
of this, when they were using words in Hebrew, they could have meant something very particular, let's say to the prophets, whatever that word was. And then maybe in the New Testament, you'll see that same word. It may have kind of filled up and changed and have different nuances. And now we see it in the New Testament, the same word that we would understand, but it means something in that context a little bit different.
A little bit different. Yeah.
And then you even have to consider ourselves as the readers of this word. We might use whatever this word is very different than a Hebrew would have used it, or somebody in the New Testament times would have used it as well. So just a consideration of all of these things, we can't just say that word means one thing all the time.
Right.
Now, does that mean we can't understand the meaning? No, of course not. These are just these little teeny tiny pieces that we need to understand what we do with language. And when we can sort of just at least recognize that within ourselves, what we're doing with the language, then it just makes us a better reader of whatever it is.
One of the things I love doing, and I'll pull this out in sermons too, I think at times, it definitely comes out in Bible studies, where I encourage all the participants always to, bring whatever translation they love, right? Whatever it is. And then what's great is when you get these instances where there's a particular word, a vocable in the Greek or the Hebrew, that we may have 8 English words or short phrases at times even that are all hitting on a piece of this. At some point they have to say something, and so they say something, and so you get these different kind of nuances or feels to it. But then it creates a conversation then about the original. Oh, well, okay. Well, maybe there's something we get to. What did it mean here in this text? How are we understanding its meaning today? Are some of these translations maybe right on the money? Maybe some are a little askew, right? And so you have these kind of conversations. And I would say then into a sermon, I've done that before where because you're usually using, an English text, obviously is what's in everyone's brain when you're preaching, and but there's times where you can bring some clarity to that, even in preaching, by just sort of wrestling with the actual meaning of the words, right? And not doing what the dictionary says, therefore it's that, because it's not necessarily. It's the context in which it's used in that.
Yes.
By that author at that time and that situation, all these things.
And so a lot of it sometimes then is maybe it's just not a single particular word that you're looking at, but you said context.
Yep.
But it's maybe this prepositional phrase. How is this word in this phrase used other times in Scripture, maybe to get, not even Scripture, maybe with this author in particular? How does he use this, word or this phrase or this context, something like that? That'll give you a little bit more information about how it's been used, or how I guess the author intended it to be used, so that you have a better way of explaining it then in a different language, which is Greek. Well, I'm sorry, which is English for us. I was thinking of like what a Greek person would think about with the Old Testament. So it's good to kind of step out of just what we think we know in our language, and to realize that there are these different levels, different layers, and that we can come to a meaning, not just picking it out of the air and sort of slapping it onto the text, but realizing that there's tools within the text. There's a good way to do it for ourselves, so that we're just not coming up with these meanings of words. Another thing that I thought was interesting that you said is that, we have this one word in a different language that has a lot of different nuances to it. And so sometimes in the translations, like you said, you have all these people, my Bible doesn't say that. My Bible doesn't say that. My Bible doesn't say that. But what's interesting is it's all talking about the same original word. What we have in the text, whatever that is, so that you can have those conversations about, like, what does this word mean, maybe originally, or in, particular effectively.
No, those are always great conversations.
Yeah,
I really think
so
so.
too.
And so it's being again, I think honest with the text, honest with what's going on in front of us, and that this is a complex again problem, but it's something that this is part of the joy of studying the Word. I think is you kind of get into these things, and it also means then that it's a lot of work, like it's joyful work. But I mean, it's like I guess what I'm saying is it's not like, yeah, I read it, I'm good. Like, did ya? Let's go back. Let's look at it again. And one of the things I've been doing this for a while now, that you find you keep going back to the Word, and you'll go back to things you've read over and over again, and you're still like, hopefully each time you're getting a little better at it, right? And so even these small pieces of like the meaning of the vocables themselves, the actual words on the page, maybe you're getting a better handle at it, or maybe you're seeing it a little more full or richer this time around.
Well, we're going to get there. We haven't even talked about yet to what do these words refer
Yes,
to, and that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time.
Next time, maybe.
Because again, these conversations, this is a complex thing that we're doing. Like, language is not simple. It's absolutely attainable, though.
Yes.
So, again, you got to say something.
You gotta say something. That's right. You do. At the end of the day, you gotta say something. All right, is that good for now?
Yeah.
We'll be moving on here shortly. Take a minute to like and subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Put your thoughts, insights below. We'll keep having these conversations. If you haven't gotten the book yet, check it out. The link is right down below, where you can buy it at the Concordia Seminary's bookstore. And God bless your preaching.